This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. And it is the first hour of our Friday program, which means it's time for our national town hall meeting with a man I think of as America's senator, although Vermonters love him as their own, Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, welcome.
Great to be with you, Tom.
Great to have you. What's on your mind?
Whoa. Well, this is a very, very busy week in the Senate. Senate is trying to get out of here for the Memorial Day weekend and for the ensuing week. So there's a lot on the plate that we'll probably be dealing with today and maybe tomorrow. As everybody knows, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is something being debated here in Congress. I will do everything that I can to see that it is defeated. But I think that those of us who are in opposition will not succeed in the Senate. I hope our colleagues in the House will do better. The fact of the matter is that the TPP is a continuation of past disastrous trade policies, which have led to the loss of millions of decent paying jobs in this country. As I think many of the listeners and viewers know, since 2001, we have lost some 60,000 factories in America, and many of them have shut down here because their owners preferred to take them to China and other low-wage countries where they could pay people pennies an hour. And that is one of the reasons why we're in the midst of a race to the bottom and a disappearing middle class. So I think enough is enough with these disastrous trade policies. Trade is a good thing, but trade has got to work for the middle class and working families of this country, for the young people of this country, and not just for the large multinational corporations. So we're going to do everything we can to defeat the TPP, and I hope our colleagues in the House are able to pull that off. Second issue that is out there is the USA Patriot Act. I voted against the original Patriot Act when I was in the House, voted against its reauthorization, and will continue to oppose it. I think all of us know that terrorism poses a very serious threat to this country, no question. But there are people out there who want to do us harm. But what we need to do is to create a situation in which we are not only opposing terrorism, not only protecting the American people, but we're also protecting the Constitution of the United States and our privacy rights. And the issue here, Tom, literally goes beyond the fact that the NSA, as we all know, is collecting information on virtually every telephone call that is made in this country, and I find that unacceptable. We know that government agencies are able to get into our emails, able to know which websites we visit, but it goes even beyond that in terms of what the government does. As a result of the explosion of technology, the private sector folks know exactly where you may be if you have an iPhone, where you may be at any given moment, where you're traveling, the kind of products that you buy, information about your financial situation, information about your health status. So the bottom line here is that technology has far, far outpaced public policy in terms of privacy rights. And it's not good enough for my colleagues to get up on the floor of the Senate or the House and talk about how America is a free society. Well, I don't know if you're a free society if somebody knows every bloody thing about you. Is that really what freedom is about? So the challenge that we face is, A, how do you protect the American people against terrorism? That's a serious issue. But how do you do it in a way that protects the privacy rights of the 99.9% of the American people who are not engaged in terrorism? And that's a real challenge, and we have some thoughts that I'll be introducing within the coming weeks as to how we can do that. But bottom line there is you really need a national conversation, because it just concerns me that we are not talking enough about this issue. There's another issue out there that is, I hear a whole lot about it. We are talking about it, and we need some solutions to it. And that is that if the United States is going to compete successfully in the global economy, we need to have the best educated workforce in the world. We need to have an educational system that says to every person in this country, and our young people, that if you have the ability and the desire, not everybody does, to want to get a higher education, you should be able to get that education regardless of the income of your family. And what's happening now, Tom, as I think all of the listeners and viewers know, is we have hundreds of thousands of bright young people who want to get a college education, and they simply can't. They're frozen out of college because of the high cost of higher education and the fact they don't want to leave school deeply in debt. And then you got millions of other people who do go to college, graduate college, and they leave school with incredible debts. And if you go to graduate school, you go to law school, you go to medical school, it is even worse. I remember talking to a young woman a number of months ago in Burlington, Vermont, whose crime in life was that she went to medical school and she's now practicing primary health care among low-income people, which is exactly what we need. She is now saddled with $300,000 in debt. We have a dental crisis in this country. We need more dentists and dental practitioners in low and moderate income areas. Dentists are leaving school $250,000 in debt. Lawyers, $100,000 in debt. If we are going to compete in the global economy, we've got to learn something from countries like Germany and Denmark, Scandinavia, countries around the world that say, you know what? For the future of our country, we need to capitalize on the intellectual capabilities of our people. They need to get the best education possible, regardless of their income. So in that regard, I have introduced this week legislation called College for All, which would make public colleges and universities tuition free for public colleges and universities through a matching program where the federal government puts in $2 and what the state governments put in $1. And in addition to that, as part of our legislation, we deal with the student debt crisis by lowering student debt interest rates in half. So that is, I think, a significant step forward in addressing a major problem in this country, which is providing higher education to all, regardless of the income. Now, at a time when there's a lot of bad news, let me tell you some very good news. And that is as a result of the courage of a lot of workers, low-income workers in this country, who have been demonstrating all over this nation and saying, you know what, the $7.25 federal minimum wage is a starvation wage. We need to have a living wage for all American workers. What we're seeing, Tom, all over this country is that cities and states are moving aggressively to raise the minimum wage. And I especially want to applaud Los Angeles. Los Angeles this week voted to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour over a 5-year period. And that is not only important for the people in LA, it sends a message to other communities and states around this country that we cannot have a nation in which we have so much income and wealth inequality. We cannot have a nation where so many of our people are working 2 or 3 or 4 jobs because they don't get the wages they need to support themselves and their families. So I congratulate LA, and we look forward to working with folks all over this country to raise the minimum wage to a living wage.
It's our Brunch with Bernie hour, our national town hall meeting with Senator Sanders taking your calls. We'll be back with more of your calls for Bernie right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And be sure to check out Bernie's website, sanders.senate.gov. You can sign up for the Bernie Buzz, his newsletter, which is very informative. And it's a great news site to begin with. Check him out on Facebook, too. And welcome back. Senator, ready to take some calls?
Let's do it.
Okay, John in Mount Vernon, Washington. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Well, thank you for taking my call. Senator Sanders, To have an effective presidency, what are your ideas or plans in getting a Congress with a preponderance of progressives that will write and pass legislation to achieve your policies for ordinary Americans?
John, great question, and thanks very much. And what I have been talking about, John, is the need for a political revolution in this country. Because at the end of the day, and I've said this as Tom has heard me say it many, many times, no president, no matter how smart or conscientious or honest he or she is going to be able to accomplish anything significant unless we have a Congress that represents the needs of the middle class and working class rather than is currently the case, the billionaires and their lobbyists and the multinational corporations. And that's the simple fact. And John says, how do we change this? Well, we will not change it when we have elections where 63% of the American people don't vote, where 80% of young people don't vote, and where big money buys politicians. That's not how we are going to change this country. So what we need, John, is a strong, unprecedented grassroots movement where essentially people are saying the United States government in our democratic form of society is supposed to represent ordinary Americans and not just the very, very wealthy. And to do that, we need to elect people around a progressive agenda. And that agenda says we're going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. We're going to have health care for all people as a right. Higher education should be a right of all people. The wealthy are going to have to start paying their fair share of taxes. We're going to do away with these corporate loopholes. In other words, a vision of America which says that there are extraordinary things that we can do and that it is absurd that 99% of all new income is going to the top 1%, at the top 1/10 of 1% owns as much wealth as the bottom 90%. That's not our America. But we don't change it, John, unless there is an agenda, specific ideas which speak to the needs of the United States and transform our economic and political system. And second of all, a mass movement to elect people to implement that agenda.
Okay. We have just 1 minute before the break, Senator. Did you want to amplify on that?
Well, let's take the next one.
Okay.
If we can.
Real quickly, Norma, you have a quick question from Montgomery, Alabama. Quick question for the Senator.
Thank you. First, an announcement, Bernie. They are doing the primary here in the South, the Confederate primaries, what they're calling it, on March the 1st in 2016. I thought you needed to know that. The date was changed.
In Alabama?
But from Texas to North Carolina. They're getting together. The South shall rise again. But what I wanted to know was, when I went to the post office, my British neighbor is home from voting in England. He is renewing his American passport. Why do we allow dual citizenship? I'll take my answer off the air.
Senator, I think we're going to have to pick that one up on the other side of the break. So we're talking with Senator Bernie Sanders. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. We'll be right back with his answers to your questions and your calls for him right after this. us. Our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Sanders, a quick question from a caller a minute ago. Your thoughts on dual
citizenship? Let me just say to Norma, I'm sorry, I'm really not an expert on the issue of dual citizenship. I don't know that much about it.
All righty. Noah in Encino, California. You are on the air, Senator Sanders.
Hi, Tom and Bernie. It's truly an honor. I've heard you mention your disappointment with Obama after he mobilized one of the largest grassroots movements in U.S. history in 2008, and then he abandoned us after he got elected. I'm wondering what you will do to keep the grassroots engaged after you're elected. Will you have a way to interact with the executive branch and Congress in a way that utilizes technology like social media? Or do you have any ideas for that at this point? I think that's really key to a flourishing democracy.
Noah, you are absolutely 100% right. I mean, for two reasons. It is absolutely imperative that we use the new technology to engage the American people in terms of standing up and fighting for their rights and in terms of knowing what's going on here in Washington. But the second point is that unless you have an activated citizenry, unless we significantly increase public consciousness, we are not going to make the changes that we need. So we take social media very seriously in my Senate office. In fact, we have more people on Facebook than any other member of the United States Senate. And we see that as a really important tool to educate folks about what we're trying to do. In terms of my campaign, we're going to be doing the same thing. But you ask what a president should do, and you're absolutely right. I don't have all the answers to that. But there is not the slightest doubt in my mind that unless ordinary people are actively involved in the political process, unless they are putting pressure on the Congress to do the things that need to be done to transform our economy and our political life, it will not get done. So Noah, I agree with you completely. I don't know that I have all the answers right now, but no president succeeds, nobody, unless millions and millions of people are not actively involved in standing up and fighting for the changes that we need.
Gary in Minneapolis, Minnesota. You're on the air, Senator Sanders.
Gary, am I on the air?
You are, sir.
Oh, thank you. I suggest that Achille Bernie thinks of a major part of his campaign, a Keynesian-style demand-side economics jobs program, like the New Deal, like Roosevelt had, infrastructure, rebuild the infrastructure.
Well, Gary, let me give you the good news. A couple of months ago, we did just that. We introduced a $1 trillion piece of legislation co-sponsored by Senator Mikulski of Maryland, which would, over a 5-year period, go a very long way in rebuilding our roads and bridges and water systems and wastewater plants and our rail system, airports, and so forth. And it would create and save about 13 million jobs. Today, and we don't talk about it anywhere near enough, real unemployment is not 5.4%. It is close to 11%. Youth unemployment is 17%. African American youth unemployment is off the charts. So Gary is right. We need a massive federal jobs program to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, to put people back to work. And when you do that, you make this country more productive, you make it more energy efficient, you make it a safer nation. So, Gary, I agree with you absolutely.
Pat in St. Prairie, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yeah, Sky Prairie. It's an honor to be on with you again, Senator Thom Hartmann. God bless you and Tom and Senator for keeping up the fight for and getting the truth out to America for 13 years. I've got a quick comment and a question, Senator. Last week I did something I've never done in my life. I've never donated to a politician. I sent a check for $100. I'm retired. I'm a veteran. If all 5 million plus people listening to Tom's show on a regular basis would send $100, that's $500 million, more than enough money for you to get elected. My question is, Senator, who are the authors of this TPP treaty, and by whose authority are they acting? And I will take my answer to the floor.
Thanks, Pat. We got 60 seconds, Senator.
Well, I think it is, Pat, thank you personally for your support, and thanks for your question. I think it is pretty widely known that while unions have had some input into some sections of the TPP, I don't think it's any great secret to tell you that the major authors of this legislation and the major beneficiaries of this legislation are the large multinational corporations. It is Wall Street. It is the pharmaceutical industry. And in terms of the latter, we are paying in our country the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, something that we are working hard trying to deal with. But in this TPP, you have organizations like Doctors Without Borders, incredibly courageous physicians who go to the most troubled parts of the world to help the people most in trouble, who worry very much that this TPP will increase drug prices in some of the poorest countries in the world because those countries will not be able to move rapidly to generics.
It's 28 minutes past the hour. We'll be back. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders answering your questions in our national town hall meeting, Brunch with Bernie. Be sure to check out the senator's website at sanders.senate.gov. You can sign up for his newsletter, The Bernie Buzz, there, and keep track of what's up.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-536-2370.
Back with your questions for Senator Sanders right after the news at the bottom of the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And 28 minutes before the hour, it's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders on the line with us. And Senator, you're still there? Ready to go?
I'm right here, Tom.
Okay, great. All right. Let's see here. Ginger in Eureka, California. Ginger, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, sir. Hello, Senator Sanders.
Hi, Ginger.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good. I'm concerned about how can Congress pass the TPP when such a high percentage of citizens said they don't want it? How is that democracy?
Well, Ginger, I don't want to break the very bad news to you, but the American people, ordinary Americans, working Americans, are not the people that the United States Congress listens to. The TPP is supported by virtually every multinational corporation in this country who have had tremendous influence over what goes in the document. It is supported by Wall Street. It is supported by the pharmaceutical industry. On the other hand, it is opposed by every trade union in this country representing millions of working people. It is opposed by virtually every major environmental group. It is opposed by many religious organizations. But this is just one more example in which we see big money controlling the legislative process rather than the needs of the American people. And that's why, Ginger, we need to elect a Congress that is pledged to support ordinary Americans and not just the billionaires.
Rich in Calumet, Michigan. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hey, Bernie. I'm really glad I can actually talk to you. We have a big issue up here that our news, everything is completely super right-wing, and nobody even has an idea who you are.
You're Rich here in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan?
Yeah, I'm in the Keweenaw, actually. And is there some way you could come up and maybe speak at Michigan Tech University or do something? People need to know about you up here, and they just don't know. They don't know about anything. We're so away from the rest of the world.
Well, you know, Rich, the answer is yes. We're going to have a very, very busy schedule, so I can't tell you when. But it's my hope to get around the country and obviously get into the great state of Michigan. But the other issue that you raise, and Tom and I have chatted about this issue over the years, is that you have large sections of this country which are completely dominated by right-wing talk radio. Opposing points of view are not getting out there, and that is just a very, very serious issue that we've got to figure out how to address. But meanwhile, as Tom reminds the listeners, we have a very active website at sanders.senate.gov where we do a whole lot of presentations about the issues that we are concerned about and what we're fighting for. And Rich, if you can get some of your friends to go to our Senate website, that would be great.
Bobby in Detroit, Michigan. You are on the air, Senator Sanders.
Hi, Senator Sanders. I've been following you for a while. My question is in terms of the NSA. Why can't we give President Obama the benefit of the doubt? Because he said that he wouldn't use the program to spy on people, and we know that the Republicans are just waiting they would love for a disaster to happen so they can pin it on him and the Democrats. And my second real quick question is, I'm a 30-year employee with the state of Michigan, and in that 30 years, I've seen constant closings and layoffs and firings. When are we just going to come to the conclusion that maybe the capitalist system just doesn't work and we need to move on from that?
Okay, well, let me start off with Obama and the NSA. And just to be clear, what the president has told us, which I believe is the truth, is that when the NSA is collecting information on virtually every telephone call in this country, it doesn't mean that they're listening in. They're not doing that. What they are doing is simply collecting data, which means that if you make a call at 9 o'clock at the night, they know what phone number you are calling from, what phone number you are calling to, where you are, how long you are on that phone. My concern, Bobby, is not that, the government is listening into these phone calls. It's that 99.9% of the phone call information that's being collected come from people who have nothing to do with terrorism. So our job is to protect the American people, but do it in a way that does not intrude on the rights of virtually all of our people who have nothing to do with terrorism. Because when you do that, you are creating a society where a handful of people have just enormous amount of access to information. Now, do I think that President Obama is using this information illegally? I do not. But think about what happened 45 years ago when you had a president named Richard Nixon. And Nixon believed that anything that the president did was by definition legal. So there he was breaking into his opponent's offices, campaign offices, breaking in, spying on his opponents, getting tax information about his opponents. Think of what a Nixon could do if he had incredible access, the kind of access that the government now has. So this is not an attack on Obama. This is saying that we need a set of policies to protect the privacy rights of law-abiding Americans, while at the same time we are vigorous in going after those people who are terrorists and want to harm us. In terms of your point about layoffs, well, there's no question about it. Virtually every multinational corporation in this country has outsourced significant amounts of jobs. They've shut down in America. They've moved to low-wage countries in order to make more money. And that is one of the reasons why I've vigorously opposed all of these trade policies. I think what we need to do is move toward a society which captures the entrepreneurial genius of people who create wealth. That's great. But on the other hand, all of that wealth cannot go just to a handful of people on the top. Just one statistic, which is just so startling. In the last 2 years, the 14 wealthiest people in this country, Bill Gates, the Koch brothers, Warren Buffett, those guys saw an increase in their wealth of $157 billion. An increase in their wealth in 2 years, which is more wealth than is owned by the bottom 40% of the American people. So what we are trying to do is create a society in which, yes, we want entrepreneurial activities. We want wealth creation. We want new ideas. But we don't want to see all of the income, all of the wealth, go to the top 1%. And you have countries around the world, whether it is Denmark, Sweden, Norway, other countries, which have understood that principle. You can create wealth, but you got to share that wealth a lot better than is currently the situation now. It is, to my mind, obscene that at the same time as we have a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires, we continue to have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country. Working families can't afford to send their kids to college. 35 million Americans have no health insurance. Many more have poor insurance policies. We can do better. We can do better. And that's the kind of society we've got to fight for.
Benjamin in Laguna Niguel, California. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Senator Sanders. In our last presidential election, I noticed we had quite a number of good candidates running for office, like Jill Stein of the Green Party and Gary Johnson and Rocky Anderson. And I was wondering, wouldn't it make sense for one of those fine people to just say, well, I want to run as Republican, and that way they could advance their agenda and get their issues in the forefront. Otherwise, they wouldn't be noticed because of our, presidential debates, which are a shame because we can't hear any third-party voices in there.
Well, Benjamin, it's an interesting idea. I'm not quite so sure that it would work. Your point about the marginalization of third-party candidates is a very important point. The truth is that it is very hard, very, very difficult for third-party candidates to even get on the ballot in certain states, to get media attention in order to discuss their ideas, or certainly to engage in debates. But I think, frankly, I suspect the Republican Party would figure out a way not to have a third-party candidate utilize their campaign process, would be my guess.
Jim in Lockport, Illinois. Just a minute to the break, Jim. Real quick question for Bernie. Jim? Okay. Edward in Chicago. Quick question for Bernie, please.
Yeah, quick question for Bernie, and this for every other presidential candidate. Senator Sanders, if you are elected president of the United States, just give me a yes or no. Do you take an oath to end immediately all our Middle Eastern wars?
Well, I don't know that you can end them all immediately, but I think what I have said over and over again is I will do everything that I can against many of my Republican colleagues here who seem to want the United States to be involved in perpetual warfare in the Middle East. I voted against the war in Iraq. I voted against the first Gulf War. And I think that certainly we do not want combat troops in the Middle East. So I will do everything that I can to see that we do everything we can to create peace in the Middle East and not make sure that our troops are not involved in endless war. That I will promise you, Everett.
Senator Bernie Sanders with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie Hour, our national town hall meeting with Senator Sanders. Check out his website at sanders.senate.gov. You can sign up for the Bernie Buzz. We'll be back with more of your calls for Bernie right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And visit sanders.senate.gov for the scoop on what Bernie's up to these days and what's going on in the United States Senate. Welcome back. Mark in Sacramento, California, watching Free Speech TV on DirecTV. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Good morning, Senator Sanders. It kind of breaks my heart just a little bit when I contemplate the billions of dollars that are going to be spent on this election cycle. And, I'm probably anticipating a Hillary attack ad during this year's Super Bowl, hopefully a Bernie Sanders attack ad during the Super Bowl. But I was wondering if you would support maybe an FCC or an election regulation that during the coming debates, when we see a candidate on television, that we can see their the contributions that have occurred, their total amount of contributions, maybe their top 5 donors. So at least we know which billionaires we're hearing from. We don't get to see the billionaires debate. What do you think of some kind of crazy idea like that?
No, Mark, it's not a crazy idea. In fact, there has been legislation introduced, which I strongly support, which is called the Disclosure Act. And what it doesn't go as far as you would like, but what it does do is it says that if the Koch brothers or other groups are putting money into TV, their faces have got to be in that ad, telling the American people, or the people of a given state, that they support that ad. So in other words, you have to inject some sense of who is sponsoring these ads in a personal way, rather than just have some phony organization spew out all kinds of lies and ugly stuff. Bottom line here is, Mark, you've put your finger on ultimately what I believe is the most important issue facing this country, because it touches on every other issue. It touches on climate change, it touches on education, it touches on the economy, it touches on everything. And that is right now as a result of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. We are looking at a situation where billionaires like the Koch brothers, Sheldon Adelson, and others are pouring huge amounts of money into the political process. There are some people who now believe that the Koch brothers themselves are a more powerful political force than either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. And the Koch brothers are an extreme right-wing family who want to end Social Security, end Medicare, end Medicaid, give more tax breaks to the rich and the EPA. And they are now the dominant, or one of the dominant political forces in America. That is why we have got to overturn, through a constitutional amendment, Citizens United, why we have to pass a Disclosure Act, and in my very strong opinion, if we are going to retain the foundations of American democracy, we got to move to public funding of elections.
Senator, in the 40 seconds before the break, do you see progress on that?
I think, like everything else, Tom, no, I don't see progress. Certainly the Republicans do not want to see that because they're the beneficiaries of the Koch brothers and other big money. I think you see a number of Democrats who are moving in that direction. And I think you see the people of this country profoundly disgusted with these attack ads after attack ads, with a situation in which super PACs will play a more significant role in a campaign than the candidate himself or herself will. What sense does that make? Yeah. That a super PAC can put more money into TV ads and organizing than the candidate himself or herself. That is where we are. That is a horrendous place to be.
We'll be back with more of your calls for Senator Sanders right after this. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Welcome back. It's Brunch with Bernie, our hour-long town hall meeting, a weekly town hall meeting with Senator Bernie Sanders, taking your calls. And Joel in Daytona Beach, Florida, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yes, this is Joel.
You're on the air, Joel.
Thank you for taking my call. My question is to Senator, if you win the Democratic nomination for president, would you be willing to promise to influence Commission on Presidential Debates to allow other qualified, legitimate U.S. presidential candidates to be invited in the debates and or at least present?
Third-party candidates, you mean?
Yeah. Well, Joel, thanks for that question, and it's similar to a question that was asked previously. The answer is yes. This country faces a series of enormous problems. And maybe at the top of the list, Joel, of the problems we face is we're not having a serious discussion about those problems. I mentioned a moment ago about the explosion of technology and the attacks on privacy rights. We hardly talk about that at all. We hardly talk about the impact that big money has on the political process and what that means, or foreign policy. There is not the kind of discussion we need. So I think in a democracy, we should be very respectful of people, whether they're conservative, progressive, whatever they may be, who have differing points of view. That's called democracy. That's a good thing. And I don't think we are hearing that wide variety of ideas. So, Joel, yes, I do believe that we should allow as much discussion as possible in as many ways as possible from people who have different points of view. So the answer to your question, Joel, is absolutely.
Randy in Ottawa, Iowa, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi. Bernie, I live out in one of these, I live in Steve King's district. And to do with what the guy from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, name recognition and problems identifying, like one of the early callers, that you don't run negative ads. That I would like to suggest that a billboard campaign along major interstate routes through these hard right districts, would that be more cost effective than you trying to hit every little town, or so that your face and your name is out there constantly as these people drive up and down the interstate back and forth to work from these rural communities? Just a suggestion, because I know that the far right has used them for everything from ag companies, big ag, or the nonprofit organizations.
Okay, Randy, let me just say this. Right now, in fact, I'm going to be in Iowa in a week. A week from today, I expect that I will be in Iowa. Your suggestion is a good one. Obviously, I'm not going to make it to every small town in Iowa, but we're going to get around that state as best that we can. So right now, we are putting together a plan on how we can be as effective as possible in Iowa, and you've given me an idea that I will think about. Thank you.
Sean in Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Mr. Sanders. I just want to know, once you become president, how will you start to strengthen the unions in the United States?
Well, Sean, I believe I have, if not the strongest pro-union lifetime voting record of any member of Congress. It's quite near that. And I am a strong, strong believer in trade unions. And I think one of the ways that we strengthen trade unions in America is to make it easier for those workers who want to join a union to be able to do so. And right now, where you have workers who do want to join a union, there are a whole lot of impediments that they face. You have union organizers who are fired, pro-union people who are punished. You have brainwashing meetings where the company forces workers to listen to anti-union speeches. So there's a lot can be done, but one of the most important things that can be done is a card checkoff piece of legislation which says that if 50% plus one, a member of an agency, a work agency, votes to join a union, signs a card to join a union, they will have that union. That's an idea that exists in many other countries, and I support it.
Andrew, we have 2 minutes to the end of the hour here. Andrew, you're from Normal, Illinois. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, I was discussing your candidacy with my father, and he agrees with you on almost all the policy points, and I'm a huge supporter, but the one thing he can't get over is he doesn't trust your experience. And I was thinking that's one point that they're going to try to hammer.
Are you talking about foreign policy experience, Andrew?
Yeah, actually, specifically, yes, foreign policy, especially with Clinton being Secretary of State. So I was wondering how you'd respond.
Okay.
Well, let me respond in two ways. In general, you know, I was a mayor for 8 years, so I know something about local and state government. I was in the House of Representatives as the only congressperson elected from the state of Vermont for 16 years, and now I'm in my 9th year in the United States Senate. So I have a little bit of experience at local, state, and federal policies. In terms of foreign policy, I have never been Secretary of State, that's true. But this is what I did do. I voted against the war in Iraq. I spoke out against the war in Iraq. And in fact, Tom, you know, I just saw a tape, something on YouTube, of me speaking out against the war in Iraq and what I feared would happen. And you know what? I think I was fairly prescient in terms of my remarks.
You were a prophet.
Well, and so, you know, I voted against the first Gulf War. So I think, Andrew, experience is clearly important. And, you know, I have been around foreign policy issues for many years, but judgment perhaps is even more important. You know, I think I have the experience and the judgment to make good foreign policy decisions.
And if I could add, Senator, I think of you as a statesman and not a politician. And that goes a long way. International respect. Senator Sanders, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom.
It was great having you.